The rain came down in sheets that April night, hammering the tin roof of my cabin like a man trying to break in, and I had pulled my chair close to the wood stove and was half dreaming when the 3 knocks came. So soft they were I half thought it a branch knocked loose by the wind. Then they came again, 3 faint taps, no stronger than a child might make, and something in the smallness of them got me up out of my chair and across the floor in my sock feet. I lifted the latch and opened the door into the storm, and there she stood. A young woman, soaked clean through, her thin cotton dress plastered to her like a second skin, her dark hair come loose and dripping down her face, 1 foot bare on the cold boards, the other still in a shoe gone dark with mud. And down the left side of her face, from a cut above her temple, blood ran in a thin line that the rain kept washing pale and the cut kept making dark again. She was swaying where she stood, holding to the doorframe with 1 white-knuckled hand, and when she lifted her eyes to mine, they were the eyes of something hunted near to death. Before I could find a single word, her lips moved, and she whispered 4 words I have not forgotten in all the years since. "Please don't let him find me." And then her knees gave way beneath her. I caught her before she struck the boards. She weighed next to nothing, a wet and shivering bundle of a thing, and I got my arm under her and brought her inside and kicked the door shut against the wind. I carried her to the stove and set her down in my own chair, the one still warm from where I'd been sitting, and for a moment I just stood there, not knowing rightly what to do. A man lives alone long enough, he forgets the shape of helping another body. But the blood on her face I understood, and the cold I understood, and so I went to work on what I knew. I am not a man given to talk, and I did not press her. I have learned in 54 years on this earth that a body will tell you what it needs telling when it is good and ready, and a question pushed too soon is just a door shoved against a frightened animal. So I asked her only the one thing. "What do they call you?" She wet her lips. "Claire," she said, and nothing more. Not a last name, not where she'd come from, not who the him was. Just Claire, said low and careful, the way a person says a thing they are not sure they ought to give away. "All right, Claire," I told her. "You're safe enough here. Ain't nobody up this ridge but me. I keep a good fire in April, for the nights still bite up on Hollow Ridge, and the kettle came to heat quick. I fetched a clean rag, and when the water was warm but not hot, I came to her slow, the way you'd come to a horse you didn't know, and showed her the rag first before I touched her. 'This here's just to clean that cut,' I said. 'I won't hurt you.' She held still. I dabbed the blood away from her temple, gentle as I could with these hands of mine, which are not gentle things to look at. They are wide and axe-scarred, the knuckles broke and healed crooked from 40 years of timber and tools, and along the left forearm runs a long pale burn from a mill belt that caught me young. I saw her eyes go to that scar once and then come away polite, and I thought nothing of it. The cut was not deep, praise be, though it had bled the way head cuts will. I cleaned it and pressed it till it quit, and while I worked I saw the other thing. Her wrist, the right one, where the sleeve had pulled back. Bruises, dark and fresh, and not the round kind a fall gives you. These were long, and they came in a row, 4 of them and a thumb's mark to the other side, the exact size and shape of a hand that had closed too hard and not let go. I did not say anything. But I have seen a deal of the world, and I knew what made a mark like that, and I felt something settle low and cold and certain in my chest, the way the ground settles before it freezes. I wrapped her wrist loose in a strip of clean cloth, more to cover it than to mend it, and asked her no questions at all. "You're chilled to the bone," I said. "I'll find you something dry." There was a trunk at the foot of my bed I had not opened in a long while. I keep it shut for a reason. But I knelt and lifted the lid, and there inside were Ruth's things. My wife's. Ruth has been gone 12 years now, taken by the fever the same spring the dogwoods bloomed early, and I have never had the heart to give her dresses away nor to look at them. But the girl was shaking, and a dead woman's kindness is still kindness, and I knew what Ruth would have said if she'd been standing there. Don't just stand gawping, Eli. Give the child something warm. So I took out a house dress, blue flowered cotton faded soft from washing, and Ruth's good quilt besides, the one she pieced herself the first winter we were married. My wife's, I said, and my voice came out rougher than I meant it. She'd want you to have the use of 'em. I'll step out a minute while you change. I stood on the porch in the wet and the dark, and tried not to think too hard on the blue dress moving inside my cabin again after 12 years of it lying still. When she rapped soft to tell me it was done, I came back in. She had Ruth's quilt round her shoulders and Ruth's dress on her, sat in the chair small as a bird, and for just a half a heartbeat the sight of it caught in my throat. Then I let it go, the way you learn to let things go, and I put the kettle on again. I gave her my bed that night. There was no argument to be had about it. I made up the chair for myself with a blanket over my knees, close by the stove, and told her to sleep, that nothing would come through that door without coming through me first. She lay down, but did not sleep for the longest while. Every time the wind threw itself against the cabin, she came half up off the pillow, her eyes flying to the door, like it might open of its own accord and let the night walk in. I sat and watched the fire and let her watch the door, and somewhere in the small black hours her breathing finally went long and even, and the storm wore itself out to a steady drip off the eaves, and we both got a little rest. Morning came up gray, the fog filling the hollow the way it does after a hard rain. I was up before her, as I'm always up before the sun, and I'd fed the chickens and got the coffee going and 3 eggs frying in the iron skillet when she stirred. She came to the table wary, Ruth's quilt still about her, and ate like a person who hadn't eaten in a day or more but was too proud to let on, taking small bites, her eyes coming up to me now and again and going back to her plate. And after a while, in her own time, she began to give me pieces of it. I was a teacher, she said, a school teacher. I had a school of my own, in a town some ways from here. She turned her cup in her hands. Then I took a different position, tutoring a man's children in his house. She stopped there a good while. He's the one, she said finally. The one I asked you about. The one I'm running from. I nodded slow and kept my eyes on the window so she wouldn't have to feel me staring. You don't got to tell me a thing you don't want to. He's powerful, she said, and there was a tremble come into her voice that she fought down. You don't understand how powerful. Everyone in that town owes him something. Their wages, their houses, the roof over the church. There isn't a soul down there who'd cross him, nor one who'd believe me over him. She looked at her wrapped wrist. I went through the woods. In the storm, I didn't have anywhere else. I just walked uphill, away from him, until I saw your light. She would not give me his name, not even then. But she had told me enough. Well, I said, you'll stay here till you're mended, till you know your own mind on what comes next. I don't drive folks off my mountain, and I surely don't drive 'em off into the hands of whatever they run from. You stay as long as you've a need. She looked at me then, a long look, like she was trying to find the catch in it, the price of it, and not finding one, and not quite knowing what to do with a kindness that didn't cost. That afternoon I had to go down for feed, and the chickens want feeding regardless of what troubles come to your door. I told Claire to stay inside, to keep the door latched, not to answer it for anyone, and I took the old flatbed down the ridge road with the fog burning off ahead of me, and I will tell you the truth. I went down that mountain not knowing I was driving straight into the heart of the thing. Mercy Bend is not a big place. A feed store, a diner, a filling station, a church, a scatter of houses along the one road. On an ordinary afternoon, you could fire a gun down the main street and not trouble a soul. But this was no ordinary afternoon. There was a humming in the town when I pulled in. A low buzz of people stood in twos and threes along the walk, and parked square in the middle of it all was a long black town car, polished to a shine, the kind that has no business on a road like ours. 2 men in good gray coats stood by it, and the word was going up and down the street before I'd even got the truck stopped. A reward. A young woman wandered off, confused, not in her right mind. A danger to herself, poor thing. Mr. Lowley's tutor gone out of her head and lost in the hills, and Mr. Lowley so worried, so generous, offering good money to any man who'd help bring her home safe. Lully. The name went through me like cold water. Vance Lully. There was not a man in the valley who didn't know it. The Lully Lumber Concern paid half the wages from here to the county line. Lully money had laid the new roof on the church and poured the stone steps up to the schoolhouse. And the confused young woman, not in her right mind, I knew exactly where she was. She was sitting in my cabin in my dead wife's blue dress, with a man's handprint bruised into her wrist, and there was nothing confused about her at all. I kept my face still. That is one thing a plain and quiet man can do that a loud one cannot. I walked into the feed store and bought my chicken feed, and I let the talk wash over me, and I felt the whole weight of what I'd taken into my house settle onto my shoulders right there at the counter. To stand against a man like Lully could cost everything a man had, and I had little enough as it was. Dora Swan was on the diner porch when I came back out with the feed sack on my shoulder. She runs the diner and the boarding rooms above it, and she's run them so long there's not much passes through Mercy Bend that Dora doesn't see the truth of. Her eyes went to me, and to the town car, and back to me, and I had the uneasy feeling she could see clean through my still face to the frightened girl up the ridge. But she said nothing. She only gave me the smallest nod, the kind that says I see you, and I'm keeping my own counsel, and I gave her one back and kept walking. I was loading the feed onto the flatbed when the man himself came out into the street. You knew him for the owner the moment you saw him. A camel haircoat, soft and pale and never near a day's work in its life, soft hands to match. Mid-40s, smooth in the face, smooth in the voice, the kind of man who has been believed his whole life and so has come to believe that believing him is the natural order of things. He moved down that street like a preacher among his flock, taking a hand here, clapping a shoulder there, calling men by their Christian names, and the men gave him their hands and their names back grateful, because their wages came out of his pocket. He told his story, and I watched him tell it. How his poor tutor, such a gentle soul, had been troubled of late, not herself, and how she'd wandered off in her confusion, and how he was just sick with worry and only wanted her found and brought home where she could be cared for proper. He told it beautiful. There was a catch in his voice at just the right place, and a shine in his eye that he wiped away with one soft knuckle. And I watched a man perform a decency that I knew for a fact he did not own, and something in me went very still and very certain, the way the air goes still right before the weather turns. His eyes passed over me once. They went down the line of us and touched on me, a big scarred backwoods fellow with a feed sack on his shoulder, and found nothing worth the looking. To Vance Lully I was a piece of the scenery, no more account than the hitching post or the dog asleep in the shade. He never saw me at all. And that was the first moment I understood I might do something, because a man who doesn't see you can't guard himself against you. I told no one. I drove up the ridge into the lifting fog, and the whole way up I turned it over slow, the way I turn over a piece of timber to see which way the grain runs before I lay the saw to it. She was waiting when I came in, and she could read it on me before I said a word. "You saw him," she said. Not a question. "I know who he is now," I said. Lully, the name out of my mouth undid something in her. She put her hand over her face, and then, low and steady, she told me the whole of it at last. How he'd been all charm when she first came to teach his children, attentive past what was proper, but she'd told herself she imagined it. How the charm had turned by degrees to control, telling her what to wear and who to speak to and where she might go, until the house was a cage with no bars you could see. And then the first time he struck her, and how he'd wept after and sworn it would never come again, and how it came again. The cut on her temple was from the last night, when she'd finally found the nerve to tell him she was leaving, and he'd taken her by the wrist, the very marks I'd wrapped, and thrown her against the doorframe hard enough to open her head. She'd run out into the storm in the one shoe she could find and not stopped running. "I have no family near," she said. "No money of my own." He saw to that. "And he's already telling everyone I'm unstable. You heard him yourself. He's building it so anybody who hears me will just nod and think, 'Poor confused thing,' and pat my hand and send me back." She looked up at me, and the fear in her was a grown thing now. That's how a man like him wins. He doesn't have to lock you up. He just has to make it so nobody believes the key. I had no fine words to give her back. I told her she was safe, and that we'd study on what was to be done, and the evening came down over the ridge, gray and dripping and quiet. It was full dark when I saw the light, a pair of headlights swinging up the ridge road through the trees, climbing slow and steady toward the cabin. There is no other place that road goes. It goes to me and nowhere else. Somebody down in that town had been asking which of the lonesome hollows had a lone man living up it, and somebody had said the words Eli Caraway, and now those headlights were coming up my mountain in the dark. Claire came to the window and saw the light, and the blood went out of her clean. "It's him," she breathed. "He's found me." "Maybe," I said. I reached up and turned the lamp down low. "And maybe not. You get back from the window now, and let me see who's come calling," I told her, in a voice I kept as level as I could to stay back of the stove and say nothing, no matter what she heard through the boards. Her eyes had gone wide and dark as a deer's at a fence. I took my coat off the peg, not to put it on but to have something heavy in my hand, and went out onto the porch and pulled the door shut behind me. It wasn't Lully who got out of the car. It was a younger man, narrow through the shoulders, Lully's driver, I figured, the one who did the errands a soft-handed man wouldn't dirty himself with. He came up to the bottom of my steps with a flashlight he didn't quite point at my face. "Evening," he said. "Sorry to come up so late. We're looking for a young woman. Wandered off from the Lully place, confused. Maybe hurt. Mister, Lully's awful worried." He smiled like the words tasted clean. "Wondered if you'd seen anybody. Man living up here alone, you'd notice." I let the quiet stretch the way it does up on the ridge. I scratched at my jaw with my scarred hand so he'd see it, the burn along the forearm, the look of a man too dull and too far back in the hills to be worth lying to. Just me up here. I said. Me and the chickens. Confused woman, you say. Out in that? She'd a caught her death. Ain't seen a soul. Don't see many. That's mostly the point of living up here. He held the light on me a moment longer, and I gave him nothing to hold, just an old timber cutter blinking in his beam wanting to get back to his stove. I have spent 54 years being looked through, and for the first time in my life I was glad of it. He thanked me, told me there was a reward if I heard anything, and went back down the steps. The headlights swung, raked the trees once more, and dropped away down the mountain. I stood on the porch until I couldn't hear the engine, and then a while past that, because the cold felt honest and I needed to think. When I came back in, Claire was on her feet with both hands pressed to her mouth. "He'll come back," she said. "Won't he? He'll come back." I agreed. There wasn't any kindness in pretending otherwise. I sat down heavy across from her and laid it out. We could keep you up here. The door barred. It'd hold maybe a week, 2. But you heard what he's telling the valley. Confused, hidden away, not in her right mind. Every day I keep you up this hollow out of sight, I'm building his story for him, brick by brick. A man hiding a woman in the woods, that's the picture he wants painted, and we'd be painting it. She sat down slow. Then what? Then we don't hide. I said it and felt the rightness of it settle in my chest like a stone finding its place in a wall. We go down into Mercy Bend. In the daylight, in front of everybody. We let the truth stand up in the open street where folks can look at it. His kind of lie does its worst work in the dark, in a whisper. Out in the light, in front of plain people, it dries up. They won't believe me. Her voice cracked clean down the middle of it. He built the church roof, Eli. He paid for the steps at the school. Half those men carry his wages home Friday. Who am I? A tutor, he'll say, went soft in the head. Some will believe him, I said, for a day. But this town is poorer than Lully thinks, and plainer and plain people have got a nose for a man performing. They've watched him shake their hands at the company picnic and forget their names by the gate. I leaned toward her. But we don't ask them to believe a feeling. We give them things they can check with their own eyes and ears. We don't argue. We show. She wiped her face with the heel of her hand. Brisk, show them what? The truth's already on you, I said gently, and I didn't have to point at her wrist for her to fold her arm against herself. But not from me. From a man they trust. We went down at first light, fog still lying in the low places like spilled milk, and I drove her straight to Doc Hale's, the little frame house at the end of Kane Street. Hale was 60-some, gone white, plain as a fence post and twice as honest, and he'd set bones and closed eyes in that valley for 40 years without ever once being for sale. He took Claire into the back room and was a long while, and when he came out he looked at me over his glasses with something hard sitting under his calm. That cut over her temple, he said, low, so she wouldn't hear. That's fresh. 3 days, 4, edge of a doorframe, the way it's torn, not a fall. But it's the wrist I want on the record, and the arm above it. Those bruises came in their own seasons, Eli. Some greening out, some near-healed, some old as a month. That's not a woman who wandered off and bumped through the brush one night. That's a long story, written on her in different inks. He set his jaw. And I'll tell you the other thing I'll swear to. There's nothing the matter with that young woman's mind. She's as clear and sound and sensible as anyone who's walked through my door this year. Whoever's saying otherwise is saying it for a reason that's got nothing to do with her health. Will you say all that? I asked, out loud, in front of him. The old man looked at me a long moment, and I watched him weigh his practice, his standing, the wages Lully spread through that valley. "I've signed my name under the truth for 40 years, he said. "I'm too old to start lying now. Bring it where you need it." And he wrote it out, careful, the date and the look of every mark, and signed it and put it in an envelope and pressed it into my hand like something that mattered. Across the street, Dora Swan was already wiping her counter, though there wasn't a soul at it yet, and she watched us cross to her diner with those sharp eyes that missed nothing. Dora has never in her life needed a thing spelled out for her. She looked at Claire, at the wrap on her wrist, at the cut, at the borrowed dress that had been Ruth's, at the way she held herself proud and scared at once, and something moved behind Dora's face that I didn't understand till later. "Sit down, honey," she said. "You'll have eggs whether you want them or not." And while Claire ate, Dora drew me aside by the coffee urn. There was a girl 2 years back, younger than her, came to me to board, worked the season at the Lully house minding the little ones. Sweet, frightened thing. One morning she was gone, and the word came down she'd stolen and run, and Mr. Lully so gracious about not pressing it. Dora's mouth went flat. I never believed it. Not for a day. I've carried it like a stone in my shoe ever since, that I didn't make a noise. So, she looked across at Claire. "Whatever you're fixing to do down here, Eli Caraway, I'm standing in it. Out loud. I owe a girl I let walk off without a word." By mid-morning the word had gone round the way word does in a small place, and folks gathered without quite admitting they'd gathered, leaned in doorways, drifted toward the diner porch. And then the Blacktown car came up Main, slow and shining, and behind it Sheriff Odell Pruitt's dusty county car, and my stomach tightened. Because Lully had done the clever thing. He'd brought the law with him, meaning to make it a tidy public errand, the worried benefactor, the gentle sheriff, the troubled girl collected and carried home, everybody nodding, the whole thing settled before noon. He stepped out of that car like a man stepping onto his own front porch. Camel coat, soft gray hat, soft hands he never once made into fists in front of people. He shook the blacksmith's hand and called the feed clerk by name and asked after his boy. He turned to the gathered street with a face full of sorrow and reasonableness, and he was good, I'll grant the devil that. "Friends," he said, warm, sad, "I'm grateful to you. You've all heard by now. Miss Bell came to teach my children, and she's not been herself these spells. This confusion, it's a sickness and no shame to her, poor thing. She's frightened and she's wandered, and she's been taken in by, well," his eyes found me at last, standing at the foot of the diner steps with Claire behind my shoulder, and passed over me the way they had the day before. A scarred backwoods nobody, hardly worth the gesture. By a man who couldn't have understood what he was dealing with. No blame in it. "Claire, sweetheart, come now. Come to the car. We'll get you home and get you well. This has gone on long enough." He held out his soft hand and smiled, the smile of a man who has never once not gotten the thing he reached for. The street wavered. I felt it, the pull of him, the wages and the church roof and the school steps all leaning on the scale at once. The easy current that wanted to carry Claire into that car so everybody could go back to their mourning. I have never been a man who raised his voice. I'm not sure the people of Mercy Bend had heard me string 10 words together in a decade. So when I stepped up onto the bottom step and spoke, the very strangeness of it made them go quiet. "Before she gets in that car," I said, slow, plain, no heat in it, "I'd ask the street to look at a couple of things. Not take my word. I'm nobody. Look for yourselves." I kept my hands open at my sides. Here's a woman that walked miles through the worst storm we've had this spring, through the woods, in the dark with one shoe, and bled doing it. You don't walk that country at night in the rain because you're confused. You walk it because staying is worse than that storm. I let it sit. Nobody moved. Mr. Lowley says she's sick in the mind. Ask Doc Hale, standing right there, whether her mind's sound, and what made the marks on her arm, and how old they are. Not from last night, not from any wander in the woods. And ask yourselves one more. This man's been offering cash money and a story about a madwoman since yesterday afternoon, before anybody'd reported a soul missing. Now, why does a worried man buy silence and spread a tale of craziness before there's even been a question asked? Worried men call the sheriff. They don't ride the hollows at midnight offering rewards. I looked at Lully then, and I wasn't angry, and I think that's what unsettled him most. That's all. Just look at it. Something had shifted in the street. I could feel it the way you feel the wind change before the trees show it. And into that shift, Claire stepped down beside me, and she found her voice. Not loud, but clear. The voice that had stood in front of a room full of children and kept order, every word landing where she said it. My name is Claire Bell, she said. I am a school teacher. I came to tutor Mr. Lully's children, and I was glad of the work. He courted me, and I was foolish enough to be flattered. And when I told him plainly I did not return his feeling and meant to leave, he took hold of me. She lifted her wrapped wrist, slow, so the whole street saw it. These are his fingers. The cut on my head is the doorframe he put me into the night I said I was going. I am not confused. I have never in my life been clearer. I walked through that storm because I was more afraid of his house than of dying in those woods. And I will say that to the county seat and to God and to anybody who asks. I am not sick. I am telling the truth, and he is paying you not to hear it. Doc Hale stepped forward off the diner porch then, the envelope already open in his hand, and said it the way he'd said it to me. Fresh cut, old bruises in their seasons, a sound and lucid mind. His name signed under all of it. And before Lully could gather his face back, Dora Swan came down her own steps with her arms folded and told the street about the girl from 2 years back, the morning she was gone, the gracious lie that came down after, and how she'd carried the shame of her silence ever since, and would not carry it one day more. I watched the camel coat go from sorrowful to something else. The warmth drained out of his face by degrees, like water out of a cracked basin, and what was left underneath was cold, and the street saw it leave him. He'd built everything on being believed, and he could feel it slipping, and a man like that, when the floor goes, he doesn't bend. He breaks the wrong way. This is grotesque, he said, and his voice had lost its gentleness. It had an edge on it now those men had never heard at any picnic. You'd take the word of a hysterical girl and he flung his hand at me, a half-wit hermit over mine. I employ your sons. I built the roof you pray under. I can take it all back, as easy as I gave it, and I will remember every face standing here. And then, because he was used to taking what he reached for and had run clean out of patience for asking, he stepped forward and seized Claire's bruised wrist, the wrapped one, the one the whole street had just been shown, and yanked her toward the car. Enough. You're coming home. She cried out short, more from the grip on the hurt than from fear, and that small sound went through the street like a current through wire. It was the wrong thing. In front of all of them, in the clean morning light, the man who'd just spent 10 minutes performing tenderness laid his ungentle hand on a hurt woman and hauled. And there was no story left to cover it, because they'd all just seen the mark he was grabbing. Sheriff Odell Pruitt, who'd been leaned on by Lully's money more times than he liked and never once liked it, stepped off the curb and put himself between them, and took Lully's wrist in one big freckled hand and lifted it off Claire as easy as lifting a child's. "Take your hand off her, Vance," he said, and his old voice had no fear in it and no hurry either. "You'll not drag a woman down my street. Not this one. Not the last one either, I'm thinking, and that's a thing I mean to ask some questions about." He set Claire gently behind him. "You've said enough. I'd go on home, was I you, and see about a lawyer before you say one word more." And that was the whole of it. No gavel, no jury, no courtroom, just a street full of faces that had turned, all at once and all the way a field of grass turns under one gust. Lully looked around, hunting for the deference that had always been there, and it was gone, every face of it. And he was only a soft-handed man in a fine coat, standing in the mud of a town that had finally seen him plain. His friends at the county seat couldn't help him, because there's no fixing what a whole town watched with its own eyes on a bright morning. He got back in his car, and the shine of it going back down Main looked smaller than it had coming up. He was finished in Mercy Bend, and he knew it. Within the month, the bigger truths, Doc Hale's questions, and Dora's old grief shook loose would follow him to the county seat. But that morning was where his power actually broke. Not in any court, but in the street, in the daylight, in front of the only people whose good opinion his money had ever really been renting. What I remember after isn't the leaving. It's the turning. Folks came up to Claire, shy, the women first, Dora's arm already around her. And then, this is the part I still can't account for easy, they turned and looked at me. Men I'd hauled timber past for 30 years, who'd nodded at me the way you nod at a fence post, looked at me like they were seeing me for the first time. And a couple put out their hands, and the feed clerk said, "Eli, just my name," like it weighed something. I didn't know what to do with it. I'm not built for being looked at. Dora gave Claire one of the boarding rooms over the diner that very day and wouldn't hear a word about money. And it came out within the week that the school down at Tanner's Creek had lost its teacher to marriage in the spring, and by the time the leaves were full, Claire Bell was standing in front of children again, the thing she was made for. It was a few evenings later, when she climbed the ridge to bring a pie from Dora and thank me proper, that she said the thing I have kept since like a coal banked under ash. We were on the porch. The chickens were settling. She looked out over the valley going blue with dusk and said, not looking at me, "Do you know how many doors I passed that night, Eli? Lit windows, houses with people in them. I didn't knock. Something in me knew better than to knock." She turned then. "Yours was dark, and you were the farthest up and the hardest to reach, and yours is the one I fell against. And you opened it. And you didn't ask me what I'd done or whose I was or what was the matter with me. You asked me my name." Her eyes were wet and steady both. Every door in that valley, and yours was the one that opened and asked my name. You think you're a small man. I have never in my life been saved by anything larger. I didn't have words for her. I'd spent 12 years since Ruth went thinking my account was closed, that whatever a man's life was supposed to come to, mine had quietly come to its little and was running out the clock up a hollow nobody had reason to climb. I'd given Claire that quilt and that cup of water without thinking they were worth anything, because I didn't think I was worth anything, and you measure your gifts by what you think your hands are worth. But you measure wrong. The kindness I'd handed over without counting had turned out to weigh more than every dollar Lully ever spread across that valley, because his bought a deference that blew off in one morning's wind, and mine had caught a falling life and held it. A man can spend his years certain he amounts to nothing, and be flat wrong about it, and never know unless the worst night of a stranger's life comes and knocks 3 times so soft he half thinks it's a branch. Claire teaches still. She climbs the ridge most Sundays, and we share supper, and the cabin holds a little more light than it used to. I cut my timber and mend what folks bring me and feed my chickens, the same plain days I always had. But I don't think of them as small anymore. I learned, late and by accident, that you don't get to know the worth of your own life by sitting alone tallying it. You find it out by what you do when something fragile and frightened turns up out of the storm needing a door. That's the whole measure of a man, near as I can tell. Not what he's got, nor what he's owed, nor whether the world ever troubles to learn his name. Just the door, whether you open it, and what you ask the one standing there. I asked her name. It turned out to be the most important thing I ever did, and I almost mistook it for nothing at all.